In this video, I would like to discuss some of the intellectual strands of cultural studies, which means some of the theories and movements that have been influential within cultural studies. So, under this banner, we can include many movements such as Marxism, culturalism, structuralism, post structuralism, psychoanalysis, and the politics of difference, under which heading we can include feminism, theories of race, ethnicity, and postcolonialism. So, in this video, I will be discussing uh, one intellectual strand, which is Marxism. How Marxian thought influenced culture studies, and what is Marxism. So, you are all familiar with the term Marxism, which is above all a form of historical materialism. It stresses the historical specificity of human affairs and the changeable character of social formations, whose core features are located in the material conditions of existence. Marx argued that the first priority of human beings is the production of their means of subsistence through labor. As humans produce food, clothes, and all manner of tools with which to shape their environment, so they also create themselves. Thus, labor and the forms of social organization that material production takes, a mode of production, are central categories of Marxism. So, you are all familiar with how Marxism focuses upon the means of production, the methods of production, and the centrality given to labor. So, there are four modes of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. So, in this, Marx gives emphasis on labor. The organization of a mode of production is not simply a matter of coordinating objects. Rather, it is inherently tied up with relations between people. These relationships, while social, that is cooperative and coordinated, are also matters of power and conflict. So here Marxism stresses upon power and conflict. Indeed, Marxists regard social antagonisms as being the motor of historical change. So because of the conflict between various power centers, power groups, changes happens. Further, given the priority accorded to production, other aspects of human relations, consciousness, culture and politics are said to be structured by economic relations, which we now call under the category the base and superstructure. So the base is the economic factors and superstructures are other factors like a culture, etc. For Marxism, history is not a smooth evolutionary process. Rather, it is marked by significant breaks and discontinuance of modes of production. Thus, Marx discusses the transformation from an ancient mode of production into a feudal mode of production and thence to the capitalist mode of production. So, there is this kind of a progress from an ancient period to a feudal mode of production to a capitalist mode of production. Different forms of material organization and different social relations characterize each mode of production. Further, each mode of production is superseded by another as internal contradictions, particularly those of class conflict, lead to its transformation and replacement. So, after the class conflict or as a result of the class conflict, there will be some kind of a change. And Marxism, as you know, focuses on capitalism. The centerpiece of Marx's work was an analysis of the dynamics of capitalism. This is a mode of production premised on the private ownerships of the means of production, especially in his day, factories, mills, workshop, and in a more contemporary way, multinational corporations, etc. The fundamental class division of capitalism is between those who own the means of production, the bourgeoisie, and those who, being a proletariat, must sell their labor to survive. The legal framework and common sense thinking of capitalist societies declare that the worker is a free agent and the sale of labor a free and fair contract. However, Marx argues that this appearance covers over a fundamental exploitation at work. Capitalism aims to make a profit and does so by extracting surplus value from workers. That is, the value of the labor taken to produce, which becomes the property of bourgeoisie, is less than the work receives for it. So surplus value, the concept of surplus value is integral or central to the Marxian thought. The realization of surplus value in monetary form is achieved by the selling of goods which have both use value and exchange value as commodities. A commodity is something available to be sold in the marketplace. Thus, commodification is the process associated with capitalism by which objects, qualities, and signs are turned into commodities. The surface appearance of goods sold in the marketplace obscures the origins of those commodities in an exploitative relationship, which Marx calls commodity fetishism, which is also a central term in Marxian thought, commodity fetishism. Further, the fact that workers are faced with the products of their own labor, now separated from them, constitutes alienation. Another term in Marxian thought, alienation. So the laborers are separated from their product. Since the proletariat are alienated from the core of human activity, namely the labor process, so they are alienated from themselves. Capitalism is a dynamic system which profit-driven mechanisms lead to the continual revolutionizing of the means of production and the forging of new markets. For Marx, this was his great merit in relation to feudalism. This is because it heralded a massive expansion in the productive capacities of European societies. It had dragged them into the modern world of railways, mass production, cities, and a formally equitable and free set of human relations in which people were not, in a legal sense, the property of others, as were serfs in feudal societies. However, the mechanisms of capitalism also give rise to perennial crises and will ultimately lead, also Marx argued, to its superseding by socialism. So the problems of capitalism include a falling rate of profit, cycle of boom and bust, increasing monopoly, the creation of a proletariat which is said to become the system's gravedigger. Marx hoped that capitalism would be run asunder by class conflict. He envisaged the proletariat's organization of defense, trade unions, and political parties, overthrowing and replacing it with a mode of production based on communal ownership, equitable distribution, and ultimately the end of class division. So Marx believed that after the class conflict, there will be a socialist society and a society without any class distinctions. So these are some of the basic ideas in Marxian thought. So what is the relationship between Marxism and the cultural studies? Cultural studies writers have had a long, ambiguous, but productive relationship with the Marxism. Cultural studies is not a Marxist domain, but has drawn succor from it while subjecting it to vigorous critique. There is little doubt that we live in social formations organized along capitalist lines that manifest deep class divisions in work, wages, housing, education, and health. So we need to take it into consideration that there is exploitation, there are problems in society. Further, cultural practices are commodified by large corporate culture industries. Cultural studies has been partisan in taking up the cause of change. So this, however, Marxism has been critiqued for its apparent teleology. So at the one point, cultural studies has taken some of the arguments of Marxism, whereas critiqued some other. That is the positing of an inevitable point to which history is moving, namely the demise of capitalism and the arrival of a classless society. There is a problem on both the theoretical and empirical grounds. Theoretically, a deterministic reading of Marxism robs human beings of agency or the capacity to act. This is so because the outcomes of human action appear to be predetermined by metaphysical laws, ironically posing as objective science that drives history from outside of human action. So, what Marx argues is that after this capitalist mode, there will be a socialist society. So, that is predetermined. That is the problem. This is so because the outcomes of human action appear to be predetermined by metaphysical laws. It is a problem on empirical grounds because of the failure of significant numbers of proletarian revolutions to materialize and the oppressive totalitarian outcomes of those that made claims to be such revolutions. So we know what happened in various parts of the world. In its engagement with Marxism, cultural studies has been particularly concerned with issues of structure, praxis, economic determinism, and ideology. On the one hand, Marxism suggests that there are regularities or structures to human existence that lie outside of any given individual. Cultural studies, along with other disciplines like sociology, has sought to explore the characteristics of those structures. So there are certain structures beyond our control. So cultural studies try to understand. On the other hand, Marxism and cultural studies have a commitment to change through human agency achieved by a combination of theory and action, that is praxis. So Marxism also is not just a theory, but it is also believe in action. In the same way, cultural studies as well wanted a change through human agency. Cultural studies has resisted the economic determinism inherent in some readings of Marxism and has asserted the specificity of culture. So you may be familiar with economic determinism, which is the Marxian idea which which believes everything has been shaped by economic factors. So cultural studies doesn't approve that. Cultural studies has also been concerned with the apparent success of capitalism. That is, not merely its survival, but its transformation and expansion. So, contrary to what Marx has believed, capitalism thrived. That is, not merely its survival, but its transformation and expansion. This has been attributed in part to the winning of consent for capitalism on the level of culture. So, how they have achieved this? Because they have achieved through consent of the people. So, there comes the questions of culture, ideology, and hegemony, which were commonly pursued through perspectives dubbed culturalism and structuralism. So, these are some of the ways in which cultural studies has engaged with Marxian thought and has gone somewhat beyond the crude analogy of base and superstructure and has analyzed issues of hegemony and ideology. Okay, thank you.